Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing No Country for Old Men. This film came out in 2007 and it was written and directed by Joel and Ethan Coen. The last review I did was for There Will Be Blood, so it seemed only fitting to go ahead and review this one next because there are quite a few similarities between the films. Not only the fact that they both came out in the same year, they also have a lot of the same themes, and they were both shot in Marfa, Texas at the same time. This movie came out at a point in the Coen brothers' career where they really needed a standout film. They had already established themselves as, somewhat offbeat, kind of eccentric cult filmmakers that tend to make films that satirize how stupid people are and how far they're willing to go to reach wealth and success, which is similar, again, to a lot of the themes in There Will Be Blood. And they depict this ignorance with a lot of cynicism. It's usually kind of graphically violent, but always with a touch of humor. They had already made a few films by this point that were already revered and proved that they were extremely talented filmmakers. Movies like Fargo, which is a classic, as is The Big Lebowski. Both films came out in the 90s. But around the early 2000s, they started to make movies that were not very well received by critics or by audiences. Movies like Lady Killers or Intolerable Cruelty. But then came No Country for Old Men, and it has since been a standout for them. A lot of people consider it one of the best films they ever made, and it's become something of an American classic in its own right. And I will say, it does have that kind of finesse of the Coen brothers, but it's very reserved compared to a lot of their other movies. I mean, yes, there still are those themes of greed, ignorance, impending doom, amorality in the center of that ignorance. But this is only really hinted at in very subtle ways. This movie, to me, feels almost more like an exercise in suspense filmmaking and crime thrillers, kind of like what we saw from them in their very first feature-length film, which was Blood Simple back in the 1980s. No Country for Old Men takes place in Texas in the 1980s, and it's about a guy named Llewellyn Moss, played by James Brolin, and he is just out hunting one day, and he discovers a bunch of dead bodies out in a field from a drug deal gone bad. In this aftermath, he does find, I think, around $2 million just in a case, and he decides to take it for himself. And this is where you start to see that metaphor of the dangers of greed and getting rich fast. Once Llewellyn takes that money, he becomes the target of a very deadly assassin named Anton Chigurh, and this is played with wonderful focus and this very taciturn intensity by Javier Bardem. In what has become maybe one of his most defining performances, I would say it was, and also one of the most iconic villains of the 21st century in terms of movies. And when I watched this movie the other day, it had been a long time since I had seen it all the way through, and I realized that I have quite a lot of opinions about it. First, I'm going to talk about what I think the film does really well, because it does a lot of really great things. As far as pure filmmaking goes, it does not get much better than this. I mean, it is easily one of the best directed things the Coen brothers ever did, and it should be studied in film classes in terms of just how to, create that tension and that authenticity, and just pure technique and craft is incredible. It's very Hitchcockian, and it actually reminds me a lot of Psycho. I found myself really starting to draw comparisons between that film in terms of just how it builds slowly, and you feel that sense of impending doom in every single moment, even when the characters are doing kind of very just average, mundane sort of things. And I love the sound design of this film as well. There's almost no music, which gives it that sense of grittiness and realism, that immediacy. The sound quality has a very rugged texture to it, and it's very intricate. It's like you can feel the screws tightening always, just throughout the film. It just creates that kind of tension. As a work of suspense, as an exercise in suspense, I marvel at what they were able to do. It's impeccable from beginning to end. And anyone that's a fan of pure filmmaking, I think, would absolutely agree with me. I also really love Tommy Lee Jones in the film. I think he's by far my favorite part of it, because he provides that ethos. He's kind of the quiet observer that makes sense of all the chaos that's around him through a lot of philosophical wisdom. But it's not pretentious or overdone when it so easily could have been. It has a kind of a poeticism, a lyricism about it that really makes sense of the evil in the world and how it has evolved in the society that we live in. That final scene of the movie where he expresses the dream that he had the night before is just exquisitely done. It is the perfect closing for this film. I mean, there's something so hopeful about the way that he reflects on, about in the dream, about fathers and sons and that sense of hope despite the very grim nature of everything that's going on. Because it is not a clear metaphor. It's something that you kind of have to toss around in your mind to decide what it means to you. And I think that different people will have different interpretations of that dream. I mean, is there credence to that hope that he's dreaming about, or is it really just something that you can dream about that does not exist in reality? So yes, the script, the pacing, all of that, I can't really have that many complaints about it. But, and this is where I'm probably going to get killed, I do have criticisms about the film just in terms of, my own personal taste. This is not my favorite Coen Brothers film. As good as it is, there's something about it that feels slightly hollow, and it does not resonate with me emotionally like other films they did in the past have, and films since then as well. One of the big problems with this movie that I have is really, it's the Anton Chigurh character. I don't find him compelling beyond the fact that Javier Bardem gave such a wonderful performance. On paper, he isn't really a character at all. He's just kind of more of an emblem of dread, of corruption that is almost indestructible. And, he furthers that trail of chaos because he feels it's his duty to pursue the violence beyond the need for money or recognition. He's just doing what he thinks is right. He's more of a concept than a fleshed out character. And I know that that is the point to some extent, but when you have a film that is trying to dig deeper beneath these themes of why society is the way it is, and when you have all of these other characters around him, like the Tommy Lee Jones character, that do have that nuance, I feel like he just doesn't quite fit with the rest of the film that's trying to be more thought-provoking. I look at, again, a movie like There Will Be Blood, which, does depict that idea of an anti-hero, but I feel like that film is far superior. There's so much more of an exploration of the Daniel Plainview character in that movie, the Daniel Day-Lewis character, than anyone in No Country. With Daniel Plainview, we learn what motivates him, what hurts him, what brings out his humanity through subtlety and a lot of visual poetry as well. And I get that there is certainly a lot of visual kind of poetry in beautiful cinematography in No Country, but I don't feel the depth and understanding, and it's not, it doesn't really explore what makes that evil tick. And while that may be a conscious choice on the part of the Coen brothers, and I've never read the book, so I can't comment on that, but it doesn't move me like a movie like Fargo does. That movie is very similar in terms of premise. I mean, they even have practically the same MacGuffin, the suitcase of money. But in Fargo, I feel like it maintains that perfect balance of the dark themes while consciously using humor to recognize the meaninglessness of this darkness and all of this corruption that we create. And you have that wonderful character of Marge Gunderson as that moral center of the film. If you watch it again, it really does. It ticks all those boxes. And yes, No Country does hint at a lot of those ideas, but they are so subtle that they're almost non-existent. There's a little bit of humor here and there, but it doesn't really explore the ridiculousness of some of those situations that we're seeing and that these characters put themselves in, because there are a lot of ridiculous situations that these characters are in. And to me, that is essential in understanding the Coen brothers' ideology as creators and just kind of in their own philosophy. Another thing that bothers me about the film is how the Llewellyn character dies and how they handle that in the movie. I know that it has been debated a lot. Some people like it, some people don't. I don't. So many of the murders in this movie are exhibited in great detail, while others may take place off-screen. And sometimes the off-screen deaths are more effective. I think, for instance, the death of the Carla Jean character, or at least I guess the presumable death of her character, who, she's Llewellyn's wife. I thought that worked because showing that death would feel almost gratuitous, masochistic. She's a character that seems very well-intentioned, and she's truly one of maybe the only moral, innocent characters in the movie that doesn't have a part to play in this fight. She was just unfortunately dragged into it because of her husband. So in a way, her death is more powerful off-screen because it's almost too painful for us to watch. But Llewellyn deserved a death scene because he put himself in this situation. So much of the film is focused on him, step by step, in excruciating detail. They build the suspense so much, and it's just climactic. But when you get to the climax, they don't show the climax. That never really sat well with me, and it didn't make sense. Now, I know that some people like it, and I'm totally willing to hear arguments for it. Maybe somebody can explain it to me and let me know, why does this work? Or, at least give me a compelling argument for it, and I'm willing to, listen. Overall, as good as the film is aesthetically, as well written as it is, it feels still like an exercise in tone and suspense that is very much in the tradition of a lot of those great Hollywood films and classic American Hitchcock movies, or like Ford, John Huston. But it's still, to me, not a fully realized piece in the way that I know that the Coen brothers are capable of doing. But having said all of that, I still really like the movie. As I said, there's a lot to admire here, and it's still a great piece of movie making, and it deserves all the accolades that it gets in that sense. But honestly, I would rather watch a Coen brothers film like, as I said, Fargo, Big Lebowski, Inside Llewyn Davis, A Serious Man. Those to me are just more interesting, more powerful, more thought-provoking. Anyway, that is my review. Thank you all for listening. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, the link is below, and you can also like my Facebook page and the link below that. Catch you next time.